Order. Mr. Secretary, if you could call the roll.
Senators Bratton,
Here.
Hudson,
Here.
Gregory, Henderson,
Here.
Nurenberg,
Here.
Schroer,
Here.
Weber.
Quorum being established, we're going to move into our order of business today. So we're starting off, we just wanted the commissioner to come up and kind of brief us on DESE. I know for some new members and just for the committee to kind of wrap our minds around everything that we're going to be dealing with the Education Committee. We wanted to have you come present and kind of potentially ask some questions. This is a friendly environment. It will be a question and answer session. And I know if there's other people in the audience that may be better versed or equipped that you feel to answer that, this is going to be a pretty relaxed, setting. So feel free to come up or to answer out. So please begin when you're ready. And thank you, Senator, for coming up. Or Commissioner, but I call you Senator. Sorry.
I like Nana. Nana's great. That's my favorite of all things. And so actually that was one of the conversations we first had when I came to the department. People were not sure what to call me. So I said Nana or Karla's fine. But I absolutely love the opportunity and honor to be called Commissioner as well. First off, I want to say thank you so very much, because just the opportunity to be able to establish a relationship with this committee, to establish a relationship with the department, with the advocates, with the people within the school system, because we all know that this work is truly, truly successful when we're collaborative, when we're not trying to attack one or the other, and being able to work through solutions and not always just identifying problems. We don't want to say we don't have problems, we don't want to try to hide problems, but we want to be able to come together and generate solutions together so we can truly, truly address all of the issues that we have across our state. And I'm here to tell you that we have several, but let's work through them. First off, I thought I would just to mention that when I was in your seat, I used to think, what is it that the Department of Education is supposed to do? What is the role of the Department of Education? And so when I became commissioner, of course, you would think that that would be the first thing I would be able to define. But I want you to know that it is very, very complex. And I want you to know that we are of service and of support to your school systems and your communities in the state. We are managed through these guardrails of statute, Constitution, federal guidelines. But I can tell you that as your commissioner, I won't have that be the only thing that I look at. I'll look to see what is it we really need to do. What is it that I can do to truly support those school districts so they can deliver quality programs across our state? I'm not going to break the law, but I am not going to hide behind a rule, okay? As far as the topic today or whatever y'all want to have a conversation about, I'd like to get started on that. I can tell you more about the department as a whole, like the number of people, the budget, the this and that, but I think I can hand you a snapshot and you can cover all those pieces pretty easy, unless Senator Bratton, you'd like for me to go into that.
Well, just a kind of a brief overview for us to kind of understand the size and scope,
Sure.
if you could, just a little bit, not
so
too much.
When I first came in, I was handed a snapshot that says these are the basic pieces around our Department of Education. And I was blown away. It's almost a $9 billion budget, and it says almost 2,000 FTE. But when I went into the Jefferson building, I didn't see 2,000 FTE people that are running our state system. And I'll have to apologize if I get these numbers wrong. But basically, there's about maybe 300, 280 or so that's actually in the Jefferson building. We have the vocational disability, vocational rehabilitation and disability determination, which is another 300 or so that's part of our department, but is not part of the K-12 support system. We have also the Office of Childhood, and we have all of our state schools. So all of those things, the state schools, School for the Blind, School for the Deaf, the schools for the severely disabled, all of those are also within the umbrella of DESE, but are not actually connected straight to the work of K-12. So it's a little bit misleading when you look at the number of people that are assigned to the department. All of that work is very important, but it's not just that. It's a very large budget, but you know all the federal money and all the state money flows through to those school districts from the department. In general, we have two main, org chart shows two main sections. We have the finance piece, administration, I call that the beans, buses, and buildings section, where it's food service, transportation, budget, all of those pieces. And on the left side, you have what's called the learning organization part. We have two deputies, Deputy of Learning Services, which is school quality, which is where MSEP sits, educator quality, which is where all your certification pieces and educator prep accreditation sit. You have special education, you have vocational career tech ed, and you also have special services. I may have missed one, but you have probably 6 of those on that side. And then on the other side, of course, you have the finance piece, the procurement, the operations, the transportation, the food service, and all of those things. Each one of those is run by a deputy. We have Kelly Jones as Deputy of Learning Services, and you have Dr. Carrie Monsey that is the Director of Finance and Administration. Both of those are here with us. So if you have a particular question about either one of those sections within the department, be sure they'll be able to help me out. We also have within that, we have just your basic central office, you could say, people, which is your communication staff, your legal staff, and obviously, because you guys all know our legislative liaison, Perry Worrell. So that's kind of the overview of the structure. The work that we do is everything from overseeing federal programs, making sure that we have all of our schools are in compliance so they continue to receive that support. We oversee the formula and make sure that we are being able to distribute those dollars as well. We have a foundation formula that we follow that gives us. It was designed to be an equitable opportunity for all kids to have the same kind of support behind them. But the thing is 20 years old, and it's been tweaked many times. And so it may be, something that we need to look at. In general, my role is to oversee all of that. And I take that responsibility very, very seriously. So any aspect of the department, I believe that I need to be able to say, I'm proud of, and I'm proud of the work we're doing, and I want to be, just the person that you come to, or know that if there's an issue, that we'll definitely identify it and be able to address it. I'm not sure, Senator, if you'd like to have any more detail than that, but I'd be glad to.
Yeah, so I guess for clarity, most departments are ran by a department head, and they kind of are the king of the department, but you operate in a different way with a board. So what's the dynamic with the board to what you have to deal with?
Right. Most of our state departments have a director or commissioner that is sometimes appointed by the governor, and then the appointment is confirmed by the Senate. Goes through gubernatorial committee, the whole thing. The department operates a little bit different in that the governor appoints the state board members. And so the state board members then are the ones who hire the commissioner. So they hired me through the state board. So it's a little bit different. I think there's like maybe 2 other state departments that operate the same way. But still in all, we still are responsible and responsive to the folks under the dome here, the House and the Senate, because obviously, even though that governor did not appoint me directly, you set budget, you set policy. So I want to be able to be a partner with you so that we can provide the best support possible.
So with the board now, there's vacancy, I guess. So correct? Am I correct in that?
There is several members that are either about to come up for review, renewal, or not, and there's some that are on expired terms. I don't know exactly the makeup of that, but it is something that I know that Governor Kehoe is currently looking at and will be able to work through. He's aware.
Okay. Now, with the way the board operates now, do you have to basically go to and get approval through all your decision making? I guess, how does that? Is it kind of like the superintendent school board kind of makeup?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because a board's role is to provide governance and oversight at a pretty high level, frankly, because there's absolutely, how would they once a month come to town and be able to really dive into the minutia of how to operate a system as complex as this? So yes, each one of those coordinators, directors, deputies, assistant commissioners, all of those people have a charge and responsibility. And so from there is my responsibility to make sure that those things are going well and that they'll be able to do their job at a high level.
And let me, for the committee, please feel free to ask any questions at any time. So I don't want to be the only guy that's asking questions if you have any. So go ahead.
Thank you. Commissioner, thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you, Senator.
Certainly appreciate all your background that you bring to this job, from sitting in our seats as well as being in the school for a very long time and having a good understanding of simply improvements in public education, help students
Absolutely.
across our state. And I think you are here for all the right reasons. And really it's about our kids and making sure that we're improving outcomes for each and every one of them. And I know, again, you're the right person for this job. I have a few questions for you. And some of them are pretty lofty, that, obviously the evergreen topic of our child care subsidy
Absolutely.
and where we are on that. And I think it's helpful just because of the weight of that topic, if you could just provide us a very quick update, and then if our DESE staff can kind of share some updates on where we stand with that. But I want to approach this. This is something I've been heavily involved in, and I think the first time I had a child care facility, all of us have these facilities that reached out to us with their frustrations of not receiving these subsidies. I had one situation that was so dire that the folks, I remember being on the phone with the pastor. This facility was run through the church, and talking with this pastor, and he said, I'm taking out mortgages, I'm literally doing everything to keep this facility afloat. These kids need this. Many of the students that were enrolled there were foster kids and those who need it the most, and having that instability. And after months of working through the system, they were forced to close their doors. And we've heard that from so many folks. And I know you all are very well aware. You came into this situation with all of this again, the finger pointing and all of that I don't think is very helpful at this point. I really want to know where we are on resolving this, and are all the subsidy payments up to date, and then what are we doing to kind of backfill and help some of these facilities?
Absolutely. Well, I want to first say, and I would love to have a hallelujah, that the calculator in the system is fixed. So that is a huge, huge lift. It's something that I have not been able to say for the first probably 4 or 5 months that I've sat in this chair, that the calculator, which is the thing that determines the amount that each of the providers receive for every attendance hour, for where the child is, for what time of day, for the age of the child, for the type of service, all of those things that come into play, that I do know right now that when they enter attendance at the site, it does create the correct payment. And you would think that would be a simple thing, and we should have had that going from the start, but frankly, it didn't happen. I walked into that system in actually July. They had turned the system on in January. So for January, February, March, April, May, June, and July, there had been serious, serious issues, just like what you described. And I can tell you that I did not sit back and wait and decide to try to figure out what's happening. I called them all in. We had a come to Karla meeting, and truly had a situation where I'm like, this is not acceptable. We've got to fix it. And I really and truly did not care who did what wrong. I just wanted it fixed, and I wanted to know when was everybody going to get paid. That's all I wanted. In every meeting I've had since, I can't say when is it fixed. They gave me that. When is everybody going to get paid? We have spent over $200 and some odd million sending out support to those providers, which is thank God. We still have a backlog because, frankly, the system, when they put it in place, there was not enough support on the front end on how to use it. So the attendance pieces that was coming in was not accurate. So those kinds of things that created what I would call messy data coming in has caused us to take more time to make sure that we're paying correctly for all that backlog. I would say, and I'm going to get a nod from somebody, tell me if they're nodding. I think we're about 70% clear, but we probably have about 25% or so that we're still working on, and they are sprinkled all the way from January to today, okay? And it's not because, all it is that maybe that provider didn't have the right authority, maybe that particular child wasn't eligible, maybe the center didn't have a license, whatever it was. There's all these things that come into play. So we have to clean that up and make sure. But we do have a target by the first of, is it the end of February, we'll have it all done. Now, are they nodding still? Okay. Thank God. So I'm going to be able to say not only hallelujah is the calculator fixed, but hallelujah we have everybody paid and we're up to date, and we're being able to operate and be able to provide support and sustainability. Sustainability, and here's one thing I want you all to know. We can't continue to pay on attendance. That model does not work. We have to pay on enrollment. We absolutely have to pay on enrollment. A business model cannot operate when you have to decide who shows up every day as to how much money is coming in your door and how much you have to support your staff. So that is something that I know will help our system. I also know that we have all kinds of work to do, not only in just that one piece of how we pay our providers for just that very small population of kids, the ones who receive supplement. We have a whole bunch of 0 to 5, after school, all kinds of times in which families are looking for support and for care for their children when they're working. So that is really, as far as my target and my focus, is on the whole. Yes, this is an issue, and I have not let up until we're absolutely finished with the whole thing. But my turn next is, what are we doing across our state to support our families that need that kind of support?
If anybody has I have another question, but let me pass it to somebody else. If somebody else has a question about that, okay.
And follow up.
Thank you for that explanation, and hope we get there sooner than later for sure. My second question really is surrounding, you mentioned this in your opening comments, are our schools for the severely disabled. And when I arrived to this job, it was something that I didn't even realize that I had one of our MSSD programs in my backyard. And I remember talking to one of the teachers there, and she said, we have always been the stepchild of public education. Nobody stands up for us. And our MSSD schools, and I don't know if you can speak to these a little bit, because honestly, this is something I knew very little about. I'm curious, one of the things that I've saw is that they haven't benefited from a lot of the upgrades that we've done across the state and investing. I'm not familiar with, or very little. I helped a little bit on some budget things, on some security upgrade for these facilities, but a lot of them were built decades and decades ago. When you look at that school compared to the schools across the street in the school district, there's no comparison, right? These are sad buildings, typically, and they really struggled with staffing.
Yes.
Retaining and recruiting really quality teachers and staff to these jobs when these are our students who need it the most. And so can you speak a little bit to where we stand, and maybe just a broad overview of MSSD, as well as where we are with staffing right now, and whether these teachers have benefited from the investments that we've done through 727 and others? Will they benefit from some of the pay increases?
I do think that they will have an impact as far as the dollars that come through when whatever on 727 is funded, yes. When I came into the job, I noticed that when I would have meetings with our legal counsel, most of our litigation pieces came from that population. And it was because we did not and have not and are not providing quality opportunities for staff. We have facilities that are definitely not up to speed. We have a real issue of serving that population of kids. And it's because of the structure. We have a very unique structure in our state, that we have these state schools spread out all across the state. They're isolated. They're not directly connected to the State Department, which is what they're supposed to be overseeing. And their buildings are very old. And now, I'll have Kerry Monsey shake his head or not, but they don't have the capacity to bond. They can't bond new facilities. True. Okay. So they can't bond new facilities, so there's no way for them to be able to pass a bond and have a new facility. They're government or state schools. I can tell you that when I first came in and I spoke to the Assistant Commissioner of Special Services, and he shared with me that there had been a pretty comprehensive research piece, because it was very noticeable that this is an area of concern. So there was a research piece done, there was analysis of it all across all of the state schools, and right now there's a task force of, I believe, 30 some odd, that I think they've had about 4 meetings, and they're taking the recommendations from that research piece to say, what do we do to address the concerns that we have on the delivery of program to these kids? Now that task force has, now, Carrie, have they met 3 or 4 times? 5. Thank you. Good. Kelly Jones is right there. Okay, 5 or 6 times, and they will have recommendation and will report out what they're seeing, what the recommendation is. So we are on it. I can tell you that there is a problem, and I won't hide behind it. We've got to do better. But we are, at least we have good thinking behind what, and then we've got to decide exactly what that recommendation looks like.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for those comments. And I'd love to continue that conversation offline and learn a little bit more. And I think it's one of the things that's really valuable, even for members of this committee and others, to go in and see these schools, because, again, I think it's something that's kind of been hidden from us and, quite frankly, really hasn't been brought to the attention of the legislature.
Right.
And so definitely merits our time and attention.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, just real quick to kind of follow up with that, so the fact that these are state schools, I mean, is there a thought process of maybe allowing local districts to potentially absorb to where
Right.
you're able to bond and to update?
That is a model that many states do use, is that this local district itself provides the program and services to those types of students with those kinds of needs. I think there's a kind of a mix of how we deliver that, and some school districts do provide some pretty strong programs for special needs kids. But we also have these state schools out amongst wherever. How many state schools do we have? 37.
37, okay.
So you can see they're all over the state.
Okay.
I think that any time that you could have more of a community around a school and not be like kind of isolated out there, the better it's going to be. So that would be reflected in the K-12 system,
Okay.
or private or charter.
Senator, proceed.
First, thank you for being here again.
Absolutely.
You mentioned the foundation formula,
Yes.
and I, like you, think it probably needs to be redone. And I'm going to make a statement that I'm going to ask your opinion on. I think part of the problem has always been, this kind of came up years ago here in the legislature. I'm sure it came up to you when you were in the legislature. And part of the problem is when you redo it, there will be winners and losers, which means, an example, everybody up here may have districts that gain money. They may have districts that lose money. But I'm like you, I think it does need to be redone and recalculated at this point. So can you kind of give me your thoughts on that?
Well, I believe the form, like I said, is about 20 years old, and we've messed with it about every year. So anything that you keep tinkering with all the time, it finally doesn't even resemble what you started with. I think that the purpose of a formula, they call it equity, but I remember back, I'm this old, y'all. I remember when we had the first lawsuit that brought the formula to play, because we didn't believe there was equitable distribution, and I know I use that word, but they don't have equal distribution of dollars behind every child, and that was the purpose of the formula. But it also relies on assessed values of local property, ag, and real estate. Well, all those things, we know that gets real touchy, doing anything with that. And then the other side of it is how do you determine the dollar amount necessary to support the variety of communities and children we have? Some of them are very high needs, such as our severely disabled, some maybe not so. So yes, we need to do it. I would say that as I sat in your chair, I wouldn't want to touch that formula unless we had enough money to support it. Right? I mean, you're going to have losers. That's definitely going to be. Right now, we have a lot of people who are winners that maybe are getting money for stuff they probably, right? It's not as equal as it
We're not
should be.
supposed to.
Thank you. And I'll quit talking there if I get myself in trouble.
Can I just ask her one more real quick question? It won't
Yes.
take long. U.S. Department of Education, there's talk that they may do away with it
Yeah.
and do block grants. Personally, I like that maybe the state would have more authority over that if it came in the form of a block grant to you, and would get us out from underneath a lot of these federal regulations that, in my opinion, at times strangle you. And I'm trying to look and see if some of them are shaking their heads and some of them are shaking their heads that they think
Sure.
the same thing. So what's your thought on that?
I think that any time that people from far, far away decide what's good for our kids in Missouri, it makes me uncomfortable. Okay, so, and I support local control. So I think that if we have more opportunity not to be directed by the U.S. Department of Education as to how we produce and how we deliver programs, I think it's better. I do know, and this is the part that concerns me, and I don't always just think about the money, but you got to follow the money. There's about a third of the dollars of every school system has federal money. So block grants, yes, because I'm hoping that those block grants will be an opportunity for us to identify and kind of focus those dollars in the areas we know that Missouri needs, not just doing something because the feds thought it was a good idea, such as state schools. Wouldn't that be an opportunity for us to have maybe some kind of block grant that is able to address the specific needs of our state, more so than a
Thank you very much, and I couldn't agree
Okay.
more.
Senator, proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
This is great. I know you're busy. I know you got a lot going on, but
We're all busy.
the fact that you would take time to come here and visit with us, it really means a lot. I appreciated what you had to say in your opening there. If I understood you correctly, and these aren't your words, I'm sure you're proud of the work you do. I'm sure you're proud of the folks you work with. But you also acknowledge there's always room for improvement, right? And you're
Every day.
and you're open to reform.
Yes.
And I know I've had conversations with a lot of folks about you and your new role, and I have indicated to them that, you know, if she is open to reform, she'd be a great one to be involved in that, because I'm not ignorant when it comes to your background and all the experience that you had. So when it comes to working together and collaborating and trying to do the best we can for the department, the people of Missouri, I'd be happy to work with you on that. I've got several questions, and they're not all on a specific topic, so I'm going to go as long as Mr. Chair gives me leeway here. These are questions from constituents. And several of them, one of them you've already touched on, I think. What does DESE do? Because there are a lot of folks out there that don't really, they want to get a better grasp on the department and what the department's responsibilities are, because this is a huge part of our state budget.
Absolutely.
So anything you have with regard to a snapshot, a handout, anything that's, if you're going to give an elevator speech on what DESE does, I'd be interested in that.
Okay, I can give you an elevator speech. We are support and service to the K-12 systems, so the early childhood system, disability determination, vocational rehabilitation, and your state schools. Probably some other things in there. When I say support and service, some people say, well, DESE's responsible for the quality of programs across the state. And I can tell you that I would love to be responsible for all the quality programs across the state, but I don't have that hammer. What I have is accreditation, and I have an opportunity to come in and do maybe a review. But as far as telling a board, a local board, what to do and who to hire and what programs they need to implement, or even what curriculum to use, that is not the department's opportunity. We don't do that. So it's a mix. It's a mix, Senator. Because, yes, I build relationships and I help them be successful, but I do not have the ability to govern for them.
You do not. Understood.
Yeah.
Are there any DEI initiatives in place at DESE?
Right now, I know that there is the word equity distributed throughout lots and lots of policy, and the word equity may be that you are reporting out a requirement from the U.S. Department of Education that says you must report these things, such as what's the salary of your rural educators, what is the salary of your urban educators, things like that. But it doesn't have the same. They just want to see, are you being fair? Fiscal stuff, right.
Okay. Beyond fiscal DEI, if I can call it that, are there any DEI initiatives that
There
you're aware
is
of?
a committee that was actually established before I got there that came from somewhere, who knows where, and it's all across most state agencies. And it is a committee that is supposed to be respectful and value each other. But they do use the terms DEI in some of their work. Now, we are addressing that. We know that is something that we are going to be charged with, and so we are looking through all of our policy and all of our pieces to make sure that we don't have those kinds of pieces reflected, because we know it's something.
What is the name of that committee?
What is the name of the committee? There it is.
So
Diversity and Inclusion.
There is a diversity and inclusion committee within DESE.
Yes.
As commissioner, do you have a position on DEI?
My position is I never ever want to be told who to hire because of filling a quota. I want quality people doing the job I ask them to do.
I would 100% agree with that.
Okay.
I appreciate that. Another question, different topic. Report cards are a great way for parents to see how their students
Sure.
are performing. What about report cards for schools? How can parents get a report card on the school they're sending their child to?
Actually, there is a report card that's posted that they do right now, and now, Kerry, I'll need you to nod. He's federal program guy for me. There is a report card, a report that each district publishes. It talks about their financial health, it talks about their current performance pieces, talks about the makeup of their buildings. Am I getting a nod here? Yes.
And
So that is out there.
If you'd like to even come up,
Carrie,
Dr.
would you come
Montes, and he's a former superintendent of Ray-Pec, a school district that I represent, so it's always great to see you.
Kerry Montes, Deputy Commissioner for Financial and Administrative Services, and there is an annual report card requirement. We have state requirements in statute that say we need to report out on certain things every year, and then we have federal requirements as well. And our report card is published each year by December 1st that meets those requirements, both state and federal.
But published, how is that published? How can parents access that?
It's on our website, and it's linked, it should be linked from each district's website as well.
Okay, okay. All right, does DESE have a way of holding school districts accountable for student performance?
The way in which that, if you want to call accountable, is through accreditation. So the accreditation status of a school district considers the performance of the kids, over a period of time.
Okay.
So that would be the only piece there.
Through accreditation then?
Through accreditation.
Okay. Now, you already mentioned earlier that when it comes to the school boards, you can't tell them what to do. What relationship does DESE have with MSBA?
I've developed a very good relationship with the director, Ms. Randall, and I have always, anytime I work with school board members as a role, a commissioner or as a role as a representative or a senator, I always charge those members of local school boards, you have a responsibility, and the responsibility is to provide quality programs for your kids. And if that's not your agenda and it's something else, then get off the board.
Okay, so
Really and truly, that is where the power lies, is right there with that local board, they're elected officials, and they have a responsibility.
So new school board members.
Yes.
Does DESE have a role in the training of new school board members?
That training comes through Missouri School Board Association, and it is a requirement that they have so many hours of training, and they're the ones that monitor that, the School Board Association does.
So that's MSBA. So if we didn't like something that was going on with the training of new school board members, is that something DESE could help us out with, or would we have to?
We can always collaboratively work together with MSBA, myself, and you to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to help them be as strong as possible.
In your experience as in education, would the statement "public comment at school board meetings allows for reliable and representative communication from all stakeholders," would that be a true statement in your experience?
I think it depends on the meeting. And I can tell you that sometimes there's meetings that are very, very disruptive, chaos. And there's a lot of that sometimes goes on. You want to be able to have a meeting where there is an opportunity for good dialogue and understanding to occur. I had open comment in my meetings. Most people do have open comment at their meetings. It's actually part of your agenda, where you have one place where you have open comment. You have to put some guardrails around that, because we know some people like to talk a long time. Some people want, and I always gave them lots of opportunity to give me all the information on the front end, provided it to my school board early on so they could have a good understanding, opportunity to have a conversation with individual members prior to a board meeting, and then when they come to the meeting and it's a public piece, then it's much more understandable and people have a better opportunity to solve problems together. So it's the way it's handled, Senator.
It's nuanced. Would that be a
Yes,
proper
I
way?
think
So MS, and the reason I'm asking this question is I have a constituent who's a new school board member.
Okay.
And he was asked that question, and he wasn't given the ability to answer to that in a nuanced way. It was true or false. Now, he said true. And I would tend to agree with him. If you give me one option there, I'm going to pick true, but he got the question wrong. So MSBA is saying that is not the case.
So the MSBA is saying that open comment is not the case as far as...
That it is not true that public comment at school board meetings allows for reliable and representative communications from all stakeholders.
I can't speak for MSBA. I can just share my
Understand.
experience as a superintendent.
I totally understand, and I get that. I do respect your experience and opinion, though, on this issue. You mentioned earlier, if I understood you correctly, we were talking about DEI. And your position on DEI that you indicated, I'm inclined to agree with that. I appreciated what you said there. Now, new school board members, again, I know this is not your responsibility, but I want you to be aware of this. New school board members are being trained in a way with relation to DEI that you and I don't agree with. And I'm concerned that that could be a way to backdoor DEI into the school system in Missouri.
I think that an opportunity, and I would be glad to set up the meeting for a conversation with MSBA, yourself, and me.
Let's do it.
Gotta
Let's
do
do it. I would love to do that, Commissioner. Senator, I have two more questions. They can wait till later, or we can, and then I will probably be done. So
Go for it.
I don't want to monopolize the committee's time. What relationship exists between DESE and Missouri NEA?
Missouri NEA is a association or professional organization that is put together to represent educators across our state, mostly in your urban areas. I know some of the people that are members of NEA. I'm not, there's not a part of our department that is housing NEA or MSBA or MSTA or any of those other association groups. They're professional associations that are member-driven.
No connection there between DESE and Missouri NEA. What is DESE's official position on individuals who would identify as transgender with regard to sports and locker rooms?
I'll have to go to my state board and get that, but I can tell you that as your commissioner, I respect the right of women's sports. I respect the right of having equal competitive programs. And it's not something that I'm that versed in, but as far as an official statement from the DESE's position, I think I'd have to refer to my state board. I think I know what the answer is, but I'd rather refer to them.
Okay, all right, maybe we can follow up
Absolutely.
with that and find out what's going on there. But your position as commissioner, you believe in protecting women, you believe
Yes.
in women and women's sports, men and men's sports.
Yes.
And it sounds to me like you'd be willing to, if that is not the case in Missouri and there's something we can do about it, you'd be willing to work with us.
That's all
there.
I know, sir.
Okay. I want to thank you very much
Sure.
for your patience, for being here, for your patience. And as I gone through these questions, this is helpful to me. These are questions that came from constituents. Now I'll be able to go back to them and tell them what the commissioner had to say. And Mr. Chair, thank you so much for the time.
Absolutely. Senator Schroeder, proceed.
Yeah, thank you again for coming today. I know you and I worked on some of the virtual education stuff.
We sure did.
I know you had a bill that I don't think made it across the finish line. Maybe it did. I know last year was kind of a blur with all of the...
We were busy, weren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of wanted to get an update on the course access and virtual program. I know there were some fixes to that. Is that something that you all can implement without the need of statutory guidance, or do you need us to pass the bill?
I do know that we have had conversations with the virtual community. Do you have any updates on that?
What I can speak to is the change that was made through the most recent legislation about claiming attendance and how we get credit for that. If there's something else more specific, I think we're already implementing that provision for this school year.
Okay.
If there may be something else you might have in mind, we'd be glad to
I think that
address
was the main issue. I know since its implementation, my time up here, it's always been whack-a-mole with that subject. And then working with you all, I'm very excited with the new transition with the departments and meeting the new department heads and continuing conversation on addressing things before they become an issue. So on that note, with the course access and virtual programs, if there's anything that we need to do, you know where to find us.
Absolutely.
The other thing I know in discussing, conversations with you last year, looking at your new position coming, we, figured that out and trying to run the department in a more efficient manner. So talking to some of my friends on the budget committee, I don't think leadership wants me on the budget committee because I'm always trying to find ways to cut things. And looking at some of the departments and their vacancies, when I pulled up the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, correct me if I'm wrong, it appears that there are 258 current vacancies of FTEs, 132 have been vacant for 6 months or more. 87 of those have been vacant for over a year. Do you all have any position on kind of scrapping some of these positions and either utilizing that money in a different way for teacher pay raises or whatever it may be?
What we're looking at is an opportunity to do that, but I'll let Kerry Monsey talk about it.
One thing I need to kind of clarify on those figures is a lot of those vacancies are within the schools for the severely disabled. And what we have in many situations is a teacher position where we couldn't fill the position with a certified teacher, and we've had to hire an interim or a substitute person into that position. So the vacancy still shows there, but we're utilizing a retiree or a part-time person or a substitute to fill the position until we can get somebody hired. We've got several of those FTE are within those state-operated programs. And so we still want to hire that full-time teacher if we can, but that's reason so many of those positions are vacant, because we just struggle to get those positions filled.
What do you think you all struggle to fulfill those types of positions?
It's a very challenging job. There's just no two ways about it. It is the most challenging educational job that I can think of, quite frankly, working in those programs. And so our starting pay is not too bad comparatively to the rest of public schools, but within a few years, the public school sector, they can advance more quickly in salary, and so we lose out on retaining folks over time. So I think that's an issue for us. The increases in state salaries the last several years have certainly helped. The turnover rate is not as significant as it was 3 or 4 years ago, but I think there's more room to improve in that area.
And lastly, I know we kind of touched on this. The new presidential administration has talked about returning the issue of education to the states, getting rid of the Department of Education. What is that going to look like for you all? If and when that does happen, what kind of hoops would you all have to jump through? Because I do agree, the more closer to these communities that we can to put the education of the kids in their hands rather than the federal government, the better. But how can we make that a smooth transition?
I think being at the table when there's conversations about how that is actually structured, which I've already raised my hand to do that with the U.S. Department of Ed. I don't think I spoke of it too much when I was serving as a senator, but I served 4 years contracted by the U.S. Department of Education, so I have some people that are still in those jobs that I can contact. Being at the table is very, very important for Missouri, and making sure that we have an opportunity to help define that, what those block grants look like. We want as much flexibility as we possibly can. But the other side of it is that making sure that whatever it is that we write to, we have feedback from across the state as to how we meet that particular block grant. So those structures where you have community leaders, business leaders, the people who receive our product of K-12 or private or charter, whatever it is, those people need to have some input as to what is it that we need to do with these opportunities is what those block grants will be. Opportunities of how we provide support and service to schools. So it's 2 layers. 1, you've got to be at the table with the U.S. Department of Ed. 2, you've got to have feedback and input as you write those block grants so that you can actually be able to reflect the needs of your districts.
Thank you all again.
So the accreditation procedure, it all hinges on MSEP, or MSIP, however you want to pronounce. So we went through 6 iterations of and revisions of that. But for a school district to become unaccredited, what's the length of time in which that process to where they go from accreditation to where provisional to unaccredited? What is that?
That timeline really depends upon the iteration of MSEP, whatever, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and how long it's been in place. I want you guys to kind of think about when we first started, when I first started in education, the way in which we accredited schools were arbitrary things like how much square footage was in your library, all kinds of bizarre things. It kind of morphed into more of a, what are your processes at your school? What are your procedures? What are your performance pieces? And so we came up with Missouri School Improvement. I think it was tied to some legislation, frankly, that we were required to have a more robust way of defining effectiveness for school systems. So we've gone through MSEP 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, now we're on 6. And I can tell you that I obviously inherited where we couldn't use the first set of data on 2022 when MSEP 6 first came in. Pilot year, statutory says we can't use pilot year to determine accreditation. So now we're on 23. 23 on up to 27, and you have to have, according to our rules and regs that we put together, that if you change them, it goes out to public opinion, it's a process. It takes 2 3-year composites currently, 2 3-year composites to lower an accreditation. So where we're at right now is that we have had several years, we've got the trend data back here. Now looking forward, we have opportunity Once that kicks in, for every year to be able, so it's not a 5-year wait. You'll have that opportunity unless we change something again. Okay?
Well, I guess, looking at it, I guess that's where, I guess my concern, because it seems like, since we've had MSEP, it's almost like every 5 years or so, or within that buffer zone, we're redoing the MSEP. So it's like, it's almost establishing a system in which there's no capability of a failing school district to actually reach unaccredited status.
Sure.
So that's my concern, especially, I was in research. A school district, just for turning in the paperwork for that, receives the 30% bump in within that score. I mean, to me, I find that a little problematic. And just because if I was a kid at school and I basically got a passing grade almost for just turning in my paperwork, even though it was blank or whatever,
Right.
I don't see that as a good metric.
Right. There's all kinds of opportunities for people to accumulate points within an annual performance report, which is what that report is, that you look to see what is the amount of points on performance indicators that create that trend data to credit with. And I can tell you, one of the questions that you all had posed to me prior to this was, so you've been doing MSEP 6 for this many years, do you think that it's going to be able to carry us for the next 10? And ever since I came in July, I've been really and truly looking very carefully at the way in which that we accredit our school systems. I think that there's opportunity for us to really hone in on those academic measures more so than the operational piece. Now, the concern is that if I come in as your new commissioner and change the world, guess how many years we have to have data? Okay? So we have to be able to balance that out and be able to really and truly look to see whether or not our students are performing in those pure core academic pieces, and does that reflect in the accreditation status of the district. Now, that's a charge I have, and that's why I'm taking seriously. Do I have it solved right this minute? No. But I can tell you that it's something that's on my radar.
Okay. Now, I've got a couple. So we've the Senator has actually, I think you were the sponsor of the School Turnaround Act, correct? Could you kind of just explain what that was, just for the edification of the committee real quick? And I was just, that will help me to kind of go into my next.
Sure. The School Turnaround Act, I think it was 19 or 20, we passed that. Basically, it's trying to identify buildings that are struggling instead of school districts. Say some school districts might even have 6 or 7 elementaries, not in the rural areas so much, but in some of the cities areas. And middle schools are a place we see this a lot of times, that maybe a middle school is struggling. Usually if it's in middle school, and you can argue with me, it's math a lot of times. If it's in elementary, it's reading. And the idea was that when we do a lot of professional development, we pull teachers out of the classroom. And the most important thing for the educational process, in my opinion, is the teacher being in the classroom. Mm-hmm. And this idea was we would have people who would come in to the classroom and work with the teachers in those struggling buildings. And it was set up, and don't hold me to the exact numbers, they got half their payment up front, and they didn't get the other half unless they met the target goal of where that building was struggling. So they weren't going to get paid unless they met that goal, and that was the idea behind the bill.
Yes, I'm very familiar with it, yes.
Now, I see on the website that we have it basically fully established. Now, has the department actually been utilizing this in any way, shape, or form?
Yes.
Or is it kind of still in the infancy
This
stages?
is historical, so I'll let him.
Yeah, I can share a little context there. Funding's been one of the limiting factors in that. In other words, the amount, I believe, is $325,000 that the company that would come in and provide the supports would do. So we established a qualified vendor list. There's a handful of companies that are on our list for those selected districts to pick among, and they enter into an agreement with that company to do their turnaround activities, whatever their targets are, what they're trying to impact, and they get, as we said, $325,000 roughly up front as part of that contract, and then if they meet their achievement goals, they can get a second payment at the end of that cycle, and it's a 3 or 4 year cycle for them to go through that improvement process. We selected 3 schools with the first allocation of budget funds we had, and we have since selected a second group of 3 schools, but that's all the funding we've had available to us at this point in the process. And at this point, we're not sure if the first 3 schools are going to exit to where that vendor is going to get the supplementary payment or not. We're not sure yet.
Did you have a follow-up?
Well, I think that the idea behind this for me was that we always identify districts, but a lot of times maybe the whole district isn't struggling, but there's particular buildings that have a particular struggle they're in and trying to bring help. And the biggest selling point for why I had the bill was that teachers didn't come out of the classroom, help went into the classroom, and I still will always hold to the most important thing to any kid's education is the teacher in the classroom, the teacher in front of them.
Thank you. So that kind of brings me into, so we've had some potential revelation of what's going on. I know we have the superintendent of St. Louis Public Schools. Some things that seem to be, quite concerning. No bus service, and scores are pretty detrimental. I guess, and looking at the system and process in place for the path to unaccrediting a school district, or I guess where are we at with St. Louis Public Schools and kind of how they've had some real significant issues?
Yes, so when obviously you all know that when I came in July, that was just right before there was the concerns with leadership at the St. Louis Public Schools. I think that was in August. And what I can tell you is that from the department's role, we have reached out directly to the superintendent, directly to the board. That was the first call, and actually that was made possible by the Missouri School Board Association set up a call. We had an opportunity I brought in a state supervisor that was about to ready to retire, and because she had worked directly with those particular and had built relationships with people in that system, I asked her to stay on and be our liaison, our bridge, so that we could get in and support some pieces I could see right off the top: literacy, their fiscal stability, support as much as we could with the transportation issues that was going on, and then the teacher recruitment retention pieces, having certificated people in front of those kids. We provided all kinds of technical support to them, and they were very receptive. And I want you to know that I don't think that has been the case at all times, to be receptive and want to work directly with the department. Now, that was just what I'm told. I haven't heard that from the district itself. As far as their accreditation, they are on the bubble. They're about 63.5, 64.7, those the last 2 or 3 years, somewhere in there. So that make them, it'll definitely be something that you've got to be able to push up to get that next step, or they will become unaccredited, or be provisional. Right now they're accredited. Mm-hmm. The next step would be provisional. And that's the same as it would be for any district that has those kinds of performance history. I'm not sure I'm answering your question, Senator, but...
Well, just, I mean, kind of what I've been given is the fact that, the school district's basically having to get Ubers for kids and that sort of thing. I guess, at what point do we kind of really elevate things if we're having to go to these extraordinary measures?
Absolutely. Dr. Monsies.
Just a couple things for context purposes. As we understand it, their contractor that they contracted bus services with last spring canceled their contract and left them really in a lurch, for lack of a better term. So they have patchworked together this year as best they can, trying to provide services to get families to school. They're in the process, as I understand it now, of going through the RFP process and getting vendors for next year to provide comprehensive transportation services. There's no substitute for having that big yellow bus that comes through every neighborhood and picks up kids and gets them to school. It's a key part of every school, nearly every school district in our state. So assuming that process goes well, that should improve dramatically moving forward. But we don't own a bus, we don't employ a bus driver. So, it's really, that's one of the things that we can provide some technical support. But I think they've got work ahead of them, and I think they're doing the right work to try to get it resolved moving forward.
So I guess, what was the impetus behind them canceling the contract? And holy cow, they're a bus service, and all of a sudden, they're I guess, bread and butter is to pick up kids. So I guess, have you had any sort of interview or anything, or exit interview?
I do not have any additional information on the reasons why. It's a complex environment to work in, there's no doubt about that, but I'm not sure I could explain what the contributing factors were.
I do think it's important to mention that there are so many of our schools, even our rural schools. I mean, I drive by a get and go, and you've got a yellow bus sitting out there saying we need drivers. And so that is something that is a stress right now across our state, is the transportation services and getting quality bus drivers in all school systems. Really complicated in an urban center.
Okay. Anybody have any questions while we're going? Okay. Well, I guess with the, St. Louis in particular, or any school district, I guess, that's really struggling, how is it that the department, plans to proceed with I guess, in the current situation that it's in, where we're seeing detrimental, effects on students? I guess, when do we interject ourselves, I guess, as a department in a much more, not a forceful, I'm not trying to say forceful, but I mean, like, actually have to step up and step in when we see potential failure? Because I've heard, that there's $35 million missing. I don't know but I mean, a lot of issues, and I've seen the scores and proficiency of reading and math is, I mean, honestly, through the floor. So I guess, when do we see all these metrics, and when do we step in? I guess I'm not trying to continue to ask the same question.
So I will let Dr. Monsies address the fiscal stability of the district and what we see and what we know has been occurring. I can tell you that my opportunity is to build a relationship with the leadership in that district, and I'm going to St. Louis, I believe, in the next week. And that kind of thing, then I might have opportunity to provide support and service or connection with, or whatever it is, and I'll do all I can to help them. So that's all I can do there, and I know that is of great interest to them as far as the leadership there.
We have a variety of ways that we offer technical assistance, whether it's finance, federal programs, teacher development, literacy. So we have some resources located in our regional professional development centers that can help a district if they're willing to join the effort. We can't direct it necessarily, but we can provide that level of support. And we have different staff members, including our area supervisors, that can work with them directly on making sure they have the connection to any resource that we do have available to us. As regards to the funding piece of the school district and our financial situation, obviously that's been something that's received a lot of media coverage, and for some good reason, some challenges that I'll give the school board credit in bringing in an outside group to do a holistic evaluation of some of the things that they were concerned about, and they have been responsive to that feedback, from what I can tell. Their overall financial situation is actually quite healthy now. Over the last 10 years, their fund balances have grown from about 8% to nearly 60 or 65%. So they are much healthier now than they have been. In fact, to the point where they probably need to invest those dollars into programs and services for their kids. And I think that's why you see that the $35 million is their planned budget deficit for this year, but their operating balances are much higher than that. They're in the neighborhood of $270 million. So they are coming from a very healthy financial position in terms of what they have to work with resource-wise, and it appears, if you realize that they're responding to the review that they contracted for, the state auditor's also in there doing a review, and so they'll have to respond to that. Their independent auditor who reports their findings to the district that gets submitted to us, they'll have to be responsive to anything that shows up in that review as well. So there are some guardrails in place that will hopefully help us address any concerns moving forward, but they are working from a place where their balances are strong, and they need to be investing in their programs and supports for their students.
Okay. You
Yes.
seemed first to me.
Yes, thank you.
Go for it.
We, You know, I do think it warrants the attention of the committee perhaps once Auditor Fitzpatrick finishes his audit, if we could take some time to dive into that. And so maybe we can communicate with the auditor's office and just see the timeline there. And I think that definitely merits, again, our attention. And as we look at these questions, and I think it is helpful to have an understanding of what has gone on to make sure that everybody's in a good spot. But my understanding is we also do have some folks here from SLPS, and if they would be willing to come forward, I understand that we have, Superintendent Borchardt in the audience. We have our president of our school board, Dr. Cousins, or Tony Cousins, with us as well. And I think it's just helpful just for the attention of the committee to, if there's any lingering questions, I'm sure they're happy to share, and everybody wants what's best for this district and the many students they serve.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, we can finish with
Sure.
with the Commissioner, and then we can move on. Senator, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nana, thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Big picture question, sort of over the medium term, like say 10 years or so, what are sort of the biggest challenges you see to public education and to schools in this state? And sort of related, and it can be the same thing or different, but what's maybe an opportunity or something over the next 10 years that you'd like to see solved, or you'd like to look back and be like, hey, during my time as commissioner, we addressed this and I feel good about it?
Thank you for the question. Yes. So I know that when you walk into a system as complex as this is, and you look out across the state, it's like, where do you start? Well, I do know that putting the quality teacher in front of every classroom of kids is number one. Teacher recruitment and retention. We absolutely have to increase the pipeline, raise the rigor, and make sure that we have the highest performing educators in front of our kids and the ones that are leading our buildings, no matter what kind of school system it is. The second thing would be literacy, in that unless I can say that every child in the state of Missouri is graduating literate, I'm not done with my work. So there's two pieces right there. There's a foundation. You learn to read from 0 to 3, and you read to learn after that. So we have to do a better job there. And I don't, the thing is that historically, and here I've been an educator for 40, and actually I was talking to somebody earlier, and I had to start upping my number, 43, I think, years. And for me to have to sit here as commissioner and say, I don't know if all kids in the state of Missouri can read, is embarrassing. We should have had those metrics and those kinds of programs in place to have that determination way before now. But here's reality, we don't. We have never ever really actually assessed literacy, just that narrow piece of literacy, not communication arts where it's English, vocabulary, spelling, speaking, all that. We've got that kind of metric, but we don't have the literacy metric. We're getting it, we're doing a better job, and I hope that I can come back, and I would love to report to this committee where we are and what our plan is. So we have teacher recruitment and retention, we have literacy, and we also have that bridge between the time you graduate and do you have a job. That career tech, vocational education, that work that we're doing for real-world learning and making learning meaningful in those secondary programs in your high school programs. You all have been to school, probably most of you gone to some kind of public school, private school, whatever. And we all know that in our secondary programs, we need to make sure that it's meaningful learning and that they can attach it to a purpose and a goal. What is it that I'm learning this for? Why? Who's going to pay me for this later? So we want to be able to do a better job there. And I can't leave out 0 to 5. We've got to take care of our babies, we've got to take care of our children and make sure they're safe and make sure they are ready for the kindergarten door. So there's my, now that's a whole lot, and I'll be here for maybe, how long do you think that's going to take me?
4 years at least.
I would like to kind of, with the literacy, so I have 5 kids. My youngest daughter is severe dyslexic, and it's one of those things that was new to me. I hadn't experienced dyslexia or what that was about. And one thing that the tutor we've had to hire, that she's raised grave concern is and I had no clue, is the whole language aspect and approach. And she says it's an abysmal failure, and it wasn't until I really got to know dyslexics and how their minds work, and that potentially 20% of students are in some form or fashion dyslexic, that the whole language approach allows a student with dyslexia to basically fudge their way through, and they don't learn to read. They learn to cope with the whole language because you're associating things that you may be able to get through. And I found out with my daughter that she was in second grade and thought she was doing great, testing fantastic by the metric, but in reality she couldn't even read. And it wasn't until we had to get a tutor and everything. So what's your thoughts on the whole language curriculum and approach? Because the tutor, she says that we got to go back to the science of reading instead of this whole language, and that's why she believes. And having been a few years into it, I believe now after seeing it. What's your thoughts on having to go back to this?
Well, I can tell you that within the Department of Education, we wholeheartedly embrace the research-based, evidence-based pieces of those elements of reading that we know. If you have evidence of having those skill sets within those, I think it's 5 areas, we are confident that you will be able to read to learn very well. And so we have literacy coaches, we have programs throughout the state that we are training teachers on how to teach the elements of reading and stepping away from those other measures that we know obviously has not worked. And I can tell you from the historical view, what's happened here is that we didn't have a metric that measured literacy per se, so we didn't know. And then the other side of it is that each district would have like a curriculum meeting, a curriculum committee. And so they would be able to say this text, this vendor, this whatever is what we're going to use, but they didn't base it on evidence, they didn't base it on data. And so they would look to see kind of like the product itself, but not the output of the product. That's what I've noticed. I'm sure there's other kinds of ideas as to why we're here at this moment when having this kind of information. But there is a light in the end of the tunnel, and I think that we've been working very hard, and I was part of Senate Bill 681, was it? Anyway, that worked. And we are implementing those things that are in that piece of legislation, and I am seeing an uptick, and I'm seeing excitement in the elementary teachers that are in those trainings and saying, thank goodness, this makes sense. I can tell you when I graduated from College of the Ozarks and walked in a classroom in 1982, and I had 2 rows of second graders and 2 rows of first graders, I didn't know how to teach reading. I learned because I was wanting to be successful as an educator, but I was not taught how to teach reading. We are teaching that now in our prep programs. It's been integrated into the prep programs as well as providing support and services to the districts and the schools in our state.
No, thank you. Any further questions? Fantastic. So I don't have any more questions as of right now, but I know with the St. Louis, kind of give them the opportunity to come. And if you have any closing remarks,
I just have a closing remark,
please.
and it's that. So I'll go back to my beginning statement. Thank you, because this is where the work occurs. This is where we are able to really and truly set the stage. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming and being willing to do this, and I hope you didn't think this was a grill session. I didn't want that to be that. I wanted it to be just an open dialogue, so thank you very much.
Okay.
It means a lot. So if we could have the St. Louis administration come up, and thank you so much for being willing to come out today. Again, this isn't going to be a grill session, so this is just an open dialogue, and thank you for making the trek up here.
Thank you. We don't really have any opening statements. We didn't expect to be here, so whatever questions you all may have of us, we're open for them.
Well, if you could just for the recording, state your name and everything, your position, please.
I am Antoinette Tony Cousins, President of the School Board, St. Louis Public School Board.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Millicent Bourishade. I am the Interim Superintendent for St. Louis Public Schools.
Thank you very much. If you'd like to proceed, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. So thank you for making the journey here. I know, all of us have seen a lot in the news about what has happened, and, if you all could just kind of explain as shortly as possible kind of what some of the big concerns were. I think everybody, it raises a red flag anytime we see tax dollars being wasted, right? That's one of them where I think anybody recognizes that that's part of our responsibility as legislators to make sure that our tax dollars are being used appropriately. And so I think that certainly raised concerns. But once you all were aware of the issues, how did you all proceed? And then just share a little bit today about where SLPS is in terms of how many students are currently there, opportunities that you all see moving forward, and also some of the challenges you all see in terms of maintaining a lot of buildings that that are not at full capacity. So if you could just speak a little bit to this, and again, just friendly conversation. Just I think it's best typically to hear straight from the folks who are there versus us getting sometimes second, third-hand information from what we see or hear from others.
Thank you. I'd like to start with one of the biggest challenges that I walked into, and that was regarding transportation. And so looking at that as a big opportunity, we've started our RFP process. We started it in November this year, and we closed the process in December. And so just as recently as January, we've had presentations from potential partners, and the goal is to make sure that we are ready to start school with school buses running on August 18th. We've already had our parents to opt in to transportation. On the first day that the enrollment process was open, which was January 21st, we had more than 10% of our parents sign up and say, I'm registering for the upcoming school year. And I want to say that equates to maybe 2,500 parents already saying what they want for next year. And so our next step in that is to make sure that we respond to our parents, letting them know that we received your interest in coming back to St. Louis. And we're going to make sure that we begin routing as early as April, May, so that we can be ready for the first day of school. Another thing that I walked into is that we've never assessed for liquidated damages. And that is when you promise us on-time arrival, picking up students and dropping them off, and making sure that at the end of the day that they get home in a reasonable time. We've never assessed for that. And so that is another thing that we're going to be working on. Our principal meetings, I'm going to deviate to our principal meetings. Our principal meetings that we have monthly, one of the things that they're working on right now is leverage leadership, and that focuses on bite-sized feedback, giving teachers bite-sized feedback. And the goal of that is to create instructional leaders. I noticed that we have a lot of great principals focused on doing what they believe is right. And what we need to focus on is instructional leaders versus managing a school. And so being an instructional leader means that you know your student by name, strength, and need. So that as you look at the local assessments that are happening in the classroom, when you look at and receive your state assessment, you can say, oh, Millicent needs this. And so when we go into the classroom, I need to make sure that the lesson plans that have been written and created addresses the need for these students. The other thing is when we do professional development, making sure that that professional development is aligned with the needs of the teachers as well as the students, and making sure that the accountability plans that each of our schools have to write reflect that professional learning that the classrooms need. I also want to share that we do have a dual enrollment program, and many of our students are so excited being a part of the dual enrollment program, as well as our adult ed program, which we have over 1,200 participants, which means that we're picking up students who either left school or adults who want to return to school to receive their education. We have received a $2.4 million literacy grant from DESE, and our AICs are assisting in the classroom as a result of that. Providing teachers and students with additional support they need to create readers and lovers of readers. That is also why we continue with our Literacy for the Lou. We have our 314 Day coming up, and we're asking students, how much time have you read? What are you reading? What do you need help reading with? And in terms of our audits, I noticed that this administration is responding to outstanding requests from maybe 3 years ago, where the audit findings have continued to be, and we are working diligently each and every day to respond to that. Now, mind you, as we're working on that, we're also keeping learning at the center. We're also keeping transportation at the center. So I want you to know that we are committed to doing what is right and best for children and families in St. Louis Public Schools.
Help me out with that piece again that you said about, 3 years of requests from the state auditor?
Yeah.
Okay, so,
The same, meaning that the same request. And so one of the things that I said is to my team is that, when we get this request, we need to make sure that we respond. We need to make sure that we do that. And so I just want you to know that we are working really hard in responding to all of the requests, and at the same time keeping learning at the center.
of course. And then, just big picture, how many students do you all serve currently?
Currently, I want to say it fluctuates between 1,800 and a little bit over 1,800.
Okay.
I'm sorry, 18,000.
18,000. And how many buildings?
We have 62 buildings and 6 programs.
Okay. And then would you just speak a little bit to the overall enrollment trends in recent years at SLPS?
I can speak to the fact that our enrollment, at this point, it is a steady, it's steady, and I say steady meaning that last year I understand that we were at 18,000, and our mobility rate fluctuate between 20% and 30%, which means that our students are going from one school building to another school building within our school system, and we're, again, doing our very best to support those. Our families are asking for support, those who are students in transition, who need additional support to make sure that they get to school. But the good thing is that they want to come to our schools. And I would also add that on the very first day when we opened up enrollment, according to the information that I received, we had over 190 families new to our district enrolling. So that's what I mean by our enrollment kind of fluctuates.
Okay. And then finally on, what would you say are your big, I know are you, help me out on your current position. Are you the interim superintendent? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So and how long have you been with the district?
I started in August of 2023, I believe, or 2020, last year.
Okay.
Last school year.
So obviously you have a little bit of time under your belt now. What do you continue to see? Not much,
That's
but
relative.
Yeah, but in terms of at SLPS, that you've been there for some time, that you can see kind of what's going on, and where are you from in terms of other districts that you've served?
Originally, I'm from Chicago, and
Okay.
then I went to Seattle, and now I'm here.
Okay, so time in education for sure, and then SLPS, relatively new, but I would say enough time to kind of understand what's going on. What would you say are your biggest challenges still to date, and moving forward, and what would you want us to know as legislators, understanding what you all are going through?
The biggest thing is having enough staff to do the work. And I say that slowly because while I look at our org charts, there are lots of people in different places, but I need the right work being done. So I would need to really, really think about that. But I would say, even as recent as, today is Tuesday, even as recent as last week, we've had our support from DESE coming in to support us, I want to say weekly. And anytime there's a call, there's a response right away to support SLPS. And that has happened from the moment that I stepped into St. Louis Public School. And when one of the members said that she was retiring, I'm thinking, what do you mean? You can't retire just yet. But we have been supported, and so I would just say that we continue to maintain that support from DESE, that they give us any time that we call for them, anytime.
Thank you.
So I just have a couple questions. So you have almost 18,000 students. So on your full-time teachers, what are you roughly at teacher-wise, and what's your potential average classroom size, would you say?
So I want to say, new to our district, we have 140 to 150 certified teachers. So speaking of that, what I would like to know is how do we maintain, or not maintain, but how would we get more certified teachers? We need,
Well, is it 150 you said, or 1,500?
we have newly, so in terms of teachers, we have
Oh, okay. I'm
close to 1,500
Okay,
teachers,
I'm
and
sorry, I
new
missed it.
teachers to us, about 150.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what would you say your average, I guess, what's your average classroom size per pupil per teacher, roughly?
So our average classroom size, I would say anywhere between 15 and 17 per teacher.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I don't know why I had envisioned like 25 or something like that. Okay.
That, in terms of where I've come from, I've seen 25 to 30.
Okay.
So this is
Substantially less, a much
less than what
better
I'm
ratio.
accustomed to, yes.
Okay. Now, I guess with the transportation issues that you've had, I guess, what does the average day look like if you're not able to, I guess, does it reduce your start time? And I guess, so how has that reduced the school day?
So with our transportation, when the buses do not run, or if there's a situation, what we do is ask for rescue buses to go and pick up students. And then the student's day begins. If the student has not had breakfast, we make sure that they get the breakfast that they need. But it does impact the learning that needs to take place in the classroom. And so that is why we are starting our RFP process as early as we do. I'm sorry.
But we do offer before and after care. So we were able to pivot. Once we ran into the situation of the transportation on the bus contract, did what they did, we were able to offer before and after care, and we were able to change our our start time for our schools. So those were the ideas that were able to come out of this. And working with DESE, we looked at how we would change the start times for our elementary and the middle schools. And just for clarification, we didn't do Uber. I did hear that statement. And also for the senator, I want to make sure a lot of people understand, don't believe everything that you all are reading actually in the paper. One thing I want to do, if you have the time, and I heard that the commissioner was saying that she was coming down, I think what helps, come see for yourself really what's happening in St. Louis Public Schools. Some of the things that Dr. Border-Shade is not saying, we have had growth in our reading. And I've heard what you said, Senator, about your daughter and the dyslexia, but children learn differently now on all layers, on all levels. We've introduced a reading program that we learn and see that in our comprehensive schools, the way that our children are learning now and our families are learning how to read is not the same that we learn how to read. The way that we teach, our teachers are teaching how to read is different. So there was a program that's been introduced that totally has changed the narrative on the way that our teachers, families, and parents are learning and teaching our children how to read, that has showed growth in our reading. But you don't read that in the paper. You don't see that. But you see it in the DESE numbers, and you see it in the growth when it came to our MSEP 6 growth level. So those aren't the things that you're reading about or learning about, but we were able to come in and show our principals that because that was a 10-point growth on a change that we had. So to hear and see that our kids can't read and this is the detriment and the district is so terrible and poor, it's not true. And that's why I'm on the board, and that's why I'm here fighting for this district, because I see the impact that we're actually having on the children and family in St. Louis Public Schools. So I want to make sure you all really see for yourselves what's happening. So I encourage everybody to come to St. Louis Public Schools. To hear this woman tell you that we're in January and we're already doing a RFP and they're already identifying a vendor. School starts in August of this year, and we're already working on a transportation vendor for August. We're already doing routing for August. Yes, DESE has worked with us every step of the way. We're here to fix a problem. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to figure out how to help St. Louis Public School and the city of St. Louis fix the education system?
I also want to add, last year in my role as chief of schools, one of the things that we worked on was identifying supports for the schools. We initiated the reading and writing initiative for our schools that where people didn't believe in them. But we believe in each and every one of our schools, each and every one of our students, each and every one of our staff members. And in looking at our M66 scores, 2024, we scored 131.5 points out of 200. And when I went back with the principals to look at the growth that each of those schools made, several of those schools who participated in the reading and writing initiative grew for the first time two digits. And when I called the principals, they said, wow, this is the first time that someone has called us recognizing the work that we have done. Thank you. Last year, each and every one of those students, they had to have a reading goal. In addition to what is required if a student has been identified as having dyslexia, a reading success plan, they had to have a reading goal, and the students had to be able to say what my reading goal is. And the students had to be able to say, I plan to grow between today and next time I take my STAR assessment, and I know what I'm working on. In fact, at our next board meeting in February, we have students, they've been charged with growing 2.5 years this year. And people say that's a lot, but it's not a lot when you have your mind set up and you work on a goal. Students are coming to the board meeting to talk about their growth on the local assessment. So they're owning it. They want to grow, and we're providing the support that they need.
Thank you. Senator, proceed.
I don't know if mine's a question or as much of a statement I kind of want to bring out. You said your mobility rate was about 20 to 30%, something like that, and just kind of pointing out to the committee, I think, and I wanted to thank you, Commissioner Eslinger, you put that on that report card I think you gave to all of us, and it showed the mobility rate across the state is 20%. Just to think about that, that means 1 out of every 5 kids in your classroom is moving every year. So I'm a 4th grade teacher and I have 20 kids, 4 of them are going to move and 4 more are probably going to move in during that year. And I just kind of wanted to point that out. That's one of the factors that we're dealing with somewhat. And I wouldn't be surprised if yours wasn't close to 230 there in St. Louis.
Yes.
But thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Does anybody have any further questions? No. Thank you for coming up and giving your testimony. Please remember there's a witness form. There are witness forms there. Just to be before we leave, put it up there for us. And thank you very much for your time. I want to thank everybody for coming today and the labyrinth of questions that we've had to do. But if I can get a second, I will make a motion for adjournment. Second. We are adjourned.